Daily Broadside, day 751. Dating can be tricky. Finding the right person in life can be tricky. So I'm going to give you some tips today that are going to recognize the fact that it's a little trickier than you first thought. But you may ask yourself at first, like, well, what is the right person? Well, that's different for a lot of people. For me, that means finding somebody that accepts you for you, somebody that you can be vulnerable with and completely comfortable and at ease with who you are and who they are and everything else. You kind of transcend each other's imperfections for the greater good of your relationship, you know. You care for that person and you protect that person to the ends of the earth. And more importantly than anything, you trust that person. You know, you each have the codes to each other's phones. You're not worried about what they're doing when you're not around. Cheating isn't an issue. You know, if you don't have the code to your partner's phone, or they get weird when you go near their phone, that's a clue to get out of the relationship. Just a little pro tip for you. But what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to talk about all the things that you have to avoid when you break up with somebody and you move on to the next, theater of your life, right? And that's names. Something very simple that we all have, right? We all have monikers that we go by. And you got to be careful when you're searching for a new person, or you're just waiting for the new person to fall into your lap. It doesn't matter which, but you got to be wary of their names. So I'll give you a few things here to consider. Number one is they can't have the same name as your ex, because that would just be weird, okay? There's a 50-50 shot you may not like your ex, so you damn sure don't want their name then. But even if you do like them and you left on good terms and you just decided to break up, you probably still don't want those 1,000 cuts coming every day by, you break up with a Jennifer and next week you're dating a Jenny. I don't think that's really going to go well for you. The second one is you can't date somebody that has the same name as your brother or sister, okay? Now, I'm mostly talking about women because that's the realm that I exist in, but you can obviously flip this to the other sex for your own purposes. But I don't want to date somebody with my sister's name, okay? Because that would be weird. Because perhaps in the throes of passion, if I were to say my sister's name, it just doesn't conjure up good things that I want in my head, okay? And likewise, you don't want to date anybody with your mom's name, okay? For the exact same reasons. And it just makes things weird. You ever been in a room with somebody that has your name and they're like, Mike, and you're like, oh, you weren't talking to me? That's the most annoying thing in the world. Names should be like fingerprints. Like, we should all have our own. Nobody should ever have the same one, okay? It should all be unique circumstances. And that way you don't end up, like, calling out your mom's name when you're passionately involved with the person that you so care much about. While we're on the topic, we'll throw in your grandma. Now, your grandma is going to be a little bit more difficult to come by because, at least for my generation, grandmas had names like Beatrice and Agatha and Hazel and Dorothy and Edith and Ethel and Ruth and Eleanor, Hazel. You're not going to come across a lot of women that have those names, although they're making a comeback. So it could find yourself in a spot where you and Dorothy are making out and, you start calling for the Tin Man and it's really your grandma. And it just makes things weird, okay? So just try to avoid dating your grandma's name or, namesake, I guess. The next one is you want to avoid people with names that conjure up bad things, okay? For example, Hillary. For example, Adolf, okay? I can't get out of my head when you say those two names, the two people that pop into my head. Sure, there's Hillary Duff. There's Hillary Duff, but there's also Hillary Clinton, who I find to be an evil creature. Adolf. I'm sure there's some good Adolfs out there over in Germany, but the only one that comes to mind is the one that killed a few million people back in the 40s. So try to steer away from those two names. The next one is you want to stay away from names that remind you of dog names, okay? For example, female dog names that are also human dog names. Annie, Susie, Penny, Chloe, Bailey. These are things that people name their dogs. It would just be weird if you were dating someone who you used to have a dog. Oh, I used to have a Bailey. And then they're like, this is odd. So just stay away from that. Historical names, okay? Historical names will conjure up things that you'll always be thinking of the historical perspective and not the person's name. The Juliuses, the Benitos, the Qaddafis, the Qaddafis, who, by the way, spells his name about 47 different ways. Look it up. The Aphrodites, the Saddams, Napoleon, Jesus, even though it's Jesus, you're still going to see it first as Jesus. Nobody other than people that speak Spanish primarily see Jesus as Jesus. You automatically go, oh, it's Jesus. I mean, Jesus. Like, you always have to correct yourself in your head. Okay. How about this? One syllable names. Try to stay away from those. And some of these are obviously shortened versions of longer words, but like Meg, Pam, Sam, Ty, Rob, all those are shortened from other things. But see, here's the problem. Okay. Meg, short for Margaret. If you're dating a Margaret, you're probably not going to be like yelling across the house, Margaret, have you seen my socks? You're going to be like, Meg. You're going to be, you're going to come up. Everybody has nicknames for everybody. You don't want to have to resort to the fact that, let's say their name is Meg and they don't have the Margaret. All right. They were born as Meg. You can't shorten Meg. All you can do is call them M. What's up? M, L, T, Q, whatever. And that's just not as inventive as being able to, you want to be able to nickname them yourself. And if their name's Ty, you're very limited by what you're going to be able to come up with. Obviously, we want to avoid people that are named Karen. My heart goes out to the people named Karen. There are a few followers on here named Kevin. And I think the male version is either like Chad or Kevin. Feel bad for them too. But as bad as I feel, I'm sorry. You just don't want to involve yourself with people like that because you'll always feel bad for them. How about weird names? Stay away from the Drusillas, the Elaminas, the Penelopes, the Cinderellas, the Malevolents, the Adelines. Those names are just weird and you just want to avoid them at all costs. I'm sure there's some male counterparts to those. The same as you, okay? I knew someone whose name was like Mike Lee, all right? Lee was his last name. He married a woman named Lee. Her name ended up being Lily, and she was not Asian, so it sounded really weird and looked even weirder. And she spelled it Lee. It wasn't an Leigh. At least that would kind of differentiate it on paper, but she was Lily. She sounded like a panda, in China. And then I knew two people that married, and they were both named Jamie, spelled the same way. Two Jamies living in the same house. You don't want to call out your own name when you're in the throes of the passion we were talking about earlier. So just stay away from it. Stripper names, obviously. We don't want to have any kind of stripper names because that's never going to be good. The Cinderella, the Ambers, the Amethyst, the London, the Brandy, the Sparkle, Cinnamon Candy, Blaze, Jazz, Sugar Plum, all the weird names. They all start sounding like American Gladiators, like really female versions of American Gladiators coming to the stage, Cinnamon and Blaze, and they're out there with the pugil sticks and all that crap. And lastly, I think you want to avoid names that not necessarily first names, but last names that conjure up bad things automatically. The Tiger King Baskin, for example, Berkowitz, Lewinsky, Pelosi, Dahmer, Darwin, Manson, all these people we need to stay away from. So if you're out there muddling your way through the dating world, you got one more thing you got to worry about. If you got 100 names, there's about 18 of them. You guys got to mark right off the table right away. But that just leads me to this. Ultimately, that person, that Peter that's out there waiting for you, that Samantha that we're going to call Sam on our own because that's what we do is create nicknames for people. They're out there waiting for you. You just got to sift through all the weird names to get to them.